Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome. We're excited to welcome Ministro José Ramón Cossío Díaz from Mexico. He was an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of Mexico. He served on the court from 2003 to 2018. Incredibly well-respected jurist and scholar who continued to write. I don't know how you managed the time. Continued to write while he was Justice of the Supreme Court. So the most important part about him is that he is and continues to be and has always been a scholar more than anything. You were a professor of constitutional law for many years. And so we brought him here to have a conversation both about the Supreme Court of Mexico, but also about the rule of law in Mexico and potential challenges to the rule of law in Mexico. And so I think it's going to be an interactive conversation. So I hope you have some questions. We're not just going to have a speech. I think we're generally an introduction, and then we'll have a conversation. So please.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, querido Diego. I am a little out of touch with my English. Be kind with my exposition, please. Well, the first question is that Mexico have federal power. This power is one of the three powers from the federal level, of course. Mexico, many of you know, is a federal country. The judicial power in Mexico is complex. We have a Supreme Court with 11 members, 2 chambers, each one of them with 5 members. The first chambers know cases around or about civil and criminal questions. The second chambers know cases around administrative and labor cases. And the full chambers know very important questions. Of course, the juicio de amparo, of course, the original jurisdiction, like here in the United States in the Article 3, in the Constitution of the United States. We know the cases between federal powers, cases between the states and the federal government, and from 1991 to today, we have a new kind of actions. The name is Acciones de Inconstitucionalidad. This is a copy from the German, the Italian, and the Spanish court, constitutional court, and the Supreme Court can know the demands, the actions from the 23% of the Congress, the members of the Congress. Mexico have two chambers, the chambers of deputies, the chambers of the Senate, have the possibility to know cases from the presidents of the Human Rights Commission, the Federal Rights Commission, and the State Commission, and the demands that came from the political parties. No? The Supreme Court in the full chamber know these cases. The other chambers, the sections, know cases from amparo, principally. The Mexican judicial system is copying the general design from the United States. We have circuits, we have districts, different kind of judges in the normal materials, criminal, civil, commercial, whatever. This is the general structure. The process to be justice in Mexico is the president nominate or propose 3 persons, 3 people, to be to put the names in the Senate. The Senate need 2/3 from have an election, and the justices are in the position for 15 years. I finished in 1918 my 15 years, and that's it. What happened now with the Mexican Supreme Court? Maybe of you know that Presidente López Obrador take the power the first day of December of 1980, and he is very aggressive, I can say, with the judicial power. not only with the Supreme Court, but with the judges in general. The President López Obrador think, or is the proposal of the government, that he have a new project. He named this project the Cuarta Transformación, the fourth transformation, and the President López Obrador tried to do many activities, many laws, many designs from the society and the political activity in Mexico. And of course, the Supreme Court is a restraint. The Supreme Court have the competences to limit the powers. And the President López Obrador, who talk every day, every morning, 5 or sometimes 6 days a week, from 7 in the morning to 9 or 10 in the morning, make a very strong considerations against the Supreme Court, against the justices, and of course the other judges in the country. And the problem now is that President López Obrador tried to do a very strong concentration of power, and he is used the army in certain aspects, the Navy, but principally the Army, to do a lot of activities in the civil life of Mexico. For example, many of you maybe know that the Army is in charge of the construction of a new airport. The Army is in charge of the construction of a new train in the peninsula in Yucatan, and another activities. And for that reason, when the judges of the Supreme Court limit these possibilities, the construction or whatever, the President López Obrador is very angry with the judicial power, and in this moment we have a lot of fight in that sense. One of the most important concerns for me is that the Supreme Court have now the possibility to limit the activities of the Army. In the next weeks, I suppose, the Supreme Court can be resolved certain cases around the participation of the Army in several activities in Mexico. We have the Army in actions of police, ordinary activities from police, because the President and the party who sustain his government, Morena is the name, and in alliance with Verde, Partido Verde Ecologista y Partido del Trabajo, are the three countries who construct this constituency for the President. The Army have the possibility to act like police, an ordinary police, a federal police, of course, in many activities, in the airports, in the streets. They have this possibility, and the Supreme Court are in this position. But this is one problem. The other one is that the President in the next days, and the party who support him, is in charge of make a big reform in the electoral laws. This is a very serious concern in my country. We have an autonomous authority, the Instituto Nacional Electoral, el INE. Maybe you listen about this authority, and the President is trying to modify, broke the INE for the next election, the election of the summer of the next year. This is a very important challenge. I think both questions, the military and electoral questions, are the most important in this moment in the Supreme Court. But this is one part of this general exposition. The second one are the problems with the rule of law in Mexico. Traditionally, in Mexico, the rule of law is weak. Many studies said that the people don't believe in law, in enforcement. This is an historical problem. This is true. But now I think we confront several specific problems. One of them is the corruption. The corruption in the country don't dismiss. On the contrary, many studies say that we have high levels of corruption. The other one is this fight with the president. The president is very uncomfortable with the rule of law. The other one is that we do a very huge reform, criminal reform in the procedures in general, like many other countries in Latin America, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, etc. But we, my perspective, my point of view is that we don't realize the whole activities that was needed to implement this reform. The police don't have the instruction, don't have the capabilities, the prosecutors don't have a new training, and for that reason, the impunity in Mexico is very high. I follow several studies, and all of them said that the impunity is increasing in a very high levels. This is one part of the rule of law problems. And the other one is the problems, and yesterday I talked with several professors here, is the problem of migration. No? Like many of you know, we have a lot of people who try to came here to the United States, crossing the Mexican territory, and we have a very hard problem because the army, literally the army, is in the southern border and is refrain the migration from many people who came from Haiti, Cuba, or Central America. And in my perspective, this is a source of many violations of human rights in the country. This problem is this is my, with this thesis, I finished this, the first part of my exposition. I think that one of the most important problems now is that in Mexico, the concept of national security is increasing. If the people like me or whatever other citizen in Mexico ask to the authorities what happened with this activity from the police, or what happened with this activity of migration, or what happened with these actions from the army, the normal, the standard answer is, well, it's a national security problem. And for that reason, many aspects of our political, our economic, our social life was high, because the government said, well, I can't help you that or that information simply because it's a national security question and I can't resolve. Mexico have an institute, an autonomous authority from the public information to make public the information from the state, and the government confront in a very hard way that institution, tried to say the information that the state, the government make or produce can be shown because it's information about the national security. I think, Diego, that with this very general, very broad point of view, maybe we can start a conversation that you.
Yes, great. We have a question there. Yeah.
Muchas gracias por compartir su experiencia y su conocimiento con nosotros, su señoría. Mi nombre es Demi, estoy en mi segundo año aquí en la Escuela de Derecho de Stanford, y antes de venirme a la Escuela de Stanford yo trabajaba con solicitantes de asilo, y como usted hizo referencia a esos problemas con migrantes, quería saber su perspectiva acerca de lo siguiente. Muchos solicitantes de asilo me decían que la policía de México trabajaba con las pandillas, sean de la Mara Salvatrucha, del barrio 18, etc. Y los solicitantes de asilo decían eso, sean mexicanos o sean centroamericanos. Entonces, desde su perspectiva como juez o en el pasado como juez, ¿cómo usted lidia con ese problema que a su nivel más básico las personas solicitando protección o tienen esa idea de que la policía no es confiable o tienen como esa experiencia de que han sido desaparecidos sus parientes, etcétera?
Right, just quickly summarize it. It's a question about whether the police in Mexico is collaborating with the drug cartels specifically, and how migrants in the U.S. often request asylum because of this criminal state link.
Oiga, primero que bien habla usted español. La felicito, habla usted muy bien español. Sí. Listo, ¿no? Muchas gracias. ¿Puedo contestar en español o en inglés o cómo quieren que hagamos?
Tratamos en inglés primero.
Tratamos, bueno, a ver, tratemos. Bueno. When I was in the Supreme Court, really, we don't have many cases about migration. Yesterday I tried to remember how many cases I know in the Supreme Court. Many of them was not related with this kind of migration, but with problems of family law between parents with the boys, other kind of problems in those years. But in Mexico, we have a very large and very hard experience with the migration, not in the judicial system, but in general. But I was a dean in ITAM, maybe some of you know this law school in Mexico is important school. In Mexico, I was dean for 9 years. And I opened in those years a clinic to try to help people in that situation. In those years, those people was put in a kind of jail, in a very unconstitutional conditions, in a very poor conditions, and many of them don't know why they are in these stations. That's the name of immigrant station. That's a very hard problem. But it's different because now that you know, we have a lot of people try to came to the United States, no, in this way. The second question is that effectively the police, the army, the gangs are related with this situation. For example, you know that what happened with this tomb of San Fernando in the state of Tamaulipas when the human rights organization in Mexico identified several bodies or rest of the bodies. It's very tragic, from people who came from Central America. In this case, it's very important in humanitarian and political and juridical conditions. Many people came from Central America. They was kidnapping from the police or from the gangs, or a combination between both of them, and it's terrible. And in Mexico now, the criminal organization, that's my point of view, I can say it in another way, it's very difficult today distinguish between the police and the gangs in this moment. I think it's much more complicated now to make a difference between one group and the other group. This is a hard problem. And the government, I think, is not very interested in the migration problem. What the Mexican government do is put the army or the National Guard in the southern border and try to repel all the migration. That's the first action. The second one is hunting people in the territory, trying detect people and invite to leave the country. And the third question is what happened with the Title 42, no, the United States ¿cómo se expulsar? Expel. This is my translator. Because yesterday we have a dinner, a great dinner, and it's a wonderful translator. You need thank you. They put in the north or the south or the United States, and you know the condition of the people there is very complicated. They have health problems, a different kind of problem, and the government of Mexico take the budget of the agencies related with migration for another activities, very different kind of activities. We have this kind of problem. Finally, I don't know many amparos. Maybe you know the Amparo Mexicano is a very complex figure. We need a class from a full semester for a full year. It's a very complex institution in Mexican law. But what you need in the amparo are certain technical questions. The first one is the standing, the temporary, and for that reason it's complicated to use the amparo to protect the migrants, because if the people who are traveling in Mexico in that situation was arrested by a certain group of police, this group pass those people to another group. This is the problem. And of course, what happened when the migrants was lastimados, was from the gangs. It's impossible from the state to do this activity. I think that in the future, yesterday I talked with Professor Chacon about this problem. I think that in the future, Mexico can be in a criminal and international responsibility for that kind of problems, because we don't solve, we don't confront the problems of the migrants, many of them from Central America.
Muchas gracias, es muy interesante escuchar su perspectiva. También puede hablar un poquito más alto.
Let's try to open it up for other people to ask questions.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, puede hablar un poquito más alto o poner el micrófono un poco más alto.
Sí, claro.
Gracias.
Esa no era una pregunta, era una recomendación.
Lo siento, pero sí.
Yeah, question?
Yeah, thank you so much for the speech. I was wondering if you could talk about kind of the current scandal about the independence of the Federal Judicial Council, especially in light of criticism about Justice Salivar's independence and the fact that, 2 members of the council are appointed by the Senate and 3 by the court, which raises problems of separation of powers.
Yes. What happened with Justice Saldívar is, I think, two big issues. The first one is that he tried to expand the period that he was designated to be the Chief Justice. In Mexico, the Chief Justice was elected by the other members of the Supreme Court. This is the first question. For 4 years. Saldívar was designated the first day of 2019 for 4 years. And he proposed to the president a big judicial reform that you know, and he tried to extend denomination from 2 more years. This is the first problem. The second one is that many analysts, some of them related with the Revista Nexos, it's a very important magazine that you know in Mexico. These people identify that Justice Zaldívar don't list several cases that was or are, because it's a present problem, related with very sensitive question to Presidente López Obrador. For example, the whole docket with militarization. This is a problem. For example, Héctor Aguilar Camín, María Amparo Casar, very well intellectuals in Mexico, very good intellectuals in Mexico, identify that Zaldívar, for example, don't put in the discussion of the Supreme Court the maybe 15 cases related with the militarization of the country. This is, I think, this is the second critic about the period that Zaldívar was Chief Justice from the Mexican Supreme Court.
Muchas gracias.
No, gracias a ti. ¿Eres mexicano?
No, argentino.
Argentino.
Hi, I'm Christina. My question is about, you talked a lot about how the court is having strong clashes with the president, and the president is trying to, the court is trying to restrain the president, especially related to the military. My question was, what is Congress doing? Because there's 3 branches, it shouldn't just be the court clashing with the president, so what actions are Congress taking to?
The Congress in Mexico, we have two chambers, no? The chambers of deputies and the chambers of the Senate. López Obrador, the party who is related with López Obrador, or talking in this general sense, have a huge majority in the first 3 years. And López Obrador can do a lot of constitutional amendments and different laws or statutes. But in this, we have the last year an election, and Morena lost the majority in the Cámara de Diputados, and this is a complex moment. For example, Presidente López Obrador in December tried to make a huge amendment in electoral questions, and they don't have the majority to implement this reform. Now he tried to make a new kind of movement that he and the people who work with him named Plan B. Maybe in the next days, maybe next weeks, you can see in the Congress different proposals to modify the electoral system in Mexico, not in the Constitution, but in the laws, in the ordinary laws. And I think, I suppose that this action will be one of the most important questions and the most important fights in the next years, because they suppose the president and Morena can do the whole arrangement, whatever. You have new law. The Supreme Court, the political parties have the possibility to start an acción de inconstitucionalidad, this specific original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court have the possibility to define if the laws are with the Constitution or against the Constitution. But the problem is very interesting, because if you open your Google or whatever, and you see the Article 41 of the Mexican Constitution, you can see that the 41 article is plain of a little questions, a little of details, because it's a huge article with a lot of point of view. In my perspective, in my point of view, is possible that the Supreme Court defined that several modifications from the law was unconstitutional or unconstitutional. This is very important, and for that reason, I suppose that in the next weeks we can have a fight between the President and the Supreme Court. The President now is disqualified several justices. He nominated 4 justices, and the other day said, well, I nominate 4 justices. One of them are very good people, and 2 of them are traitors. Traitors for what? Or for who? Traitor for me. Well, this is the expression. It's not my expression, of course. It's the expression of the President. And for that reason, I suppose that the level of conflict is high.
Licenciado, buenas tardes. Gracias por su tiempo. Una pregunta respecto de cuál es su opinión con el reciente escándalo de la ministra Yasmín Esquivel, porque todo esto parece como otra vez una manera de demeritar el peso que tiene la Suprema Corte y ponerle en el ojo público de que la Suprema Corte no es el gran ente independiente, no, o sea, es demeritarla con una ministra que es plagio, lo que sea. Entonces, ¿cuál es su perspectiva al respecto? ¿Es en realidad algo más orquestado por el Poder Federal para demeritar la Suprema Corte o realmente pues algo que salió, ocurrió y está en los medios y se hizo público, algo por ahí? ¿Cuál es su opinión al respecto?
Diego, ¿tú quieres poner en contexto la facilidad?
Yeah, he's asking about a scandal involving one of the justices. Maybe give a little bit of background on the scandal in English so everybody knows the context of the question.
Yeah, the ministra or Justice Ministra Esquivel committed plagiarism when she made her thesis, and she was granted the degree as lawyer, and you're required to be a lawyer in Mexico in order to be a justice or a judge. So this scandal came like this recent last month, I think, and in the end, it was like all publicized by all the media and everyone else. But in relation to what the minister is saying, justice is saying, we have this clash between the 2 powers, federal government and the justice, the Supreme Court of Justice. So it seems that it could be orchestrated to some extent in order to affect also the perception of the public about the Supreme Court.
Yes, what happened is this one. The Justice Esquivel is trying to be the next Chief Justice. And in Mexico, I tell you, the process is very simple. The justices vote from one of the members of the Supreme Court to be justice from 4 years. In December, in the middle of December, some newspapers, specifically one of them, said that Justice Esquivel, ¿cómo es plagio? The thesis that some guy 2 years after had a thesis, and Justice Esquivel copied the thesis and presented. In Mexico, is a condition to be a lawyer to present in many universities in those times a thesis. Well, this is the problem. For that reason, Justice Esquivel can be president of the Chief Justice from the Mexican Supreme Court. But the question is very complex because for many people, Justice Esquivel was the person who López Obrador are interested to be president of the Supreme Court. This is interesting, and for that reason, I suppose that the government don't try to fight against the Supreme Court related with Justice Esquivel. I suppose this is the question. But now the problem is very, very complex because the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico need to define what happened with the thesis. In this moment, the UNAM, like many other universities in the world, they have ethics committee, and the ethics committee are open a review of those questions. The problem is interesting too. What happens if the committee and the university and the authority say that Justice Esquivel effectively copied the whole thesis of this guy? Well, it's not very clear the answer. I understand perfectly well the moral problem, the ethic problem. I understand, but in terms of juridical sense, it's complicated. First of all, who is the authority to determine the copy? Second, this authority, when you remove the title of this lady, what happened with the annual resolutions, with the decisions that she take in the past? No, it's a very complex moment. But I agree with you that it's a very bad moment. Never is a good moment to discredit the Supreme Court for any country. But this is a very bad moment because the whole public opinion is very interested in the decision, in what happened in this moment. And once again, the president of Mexico, in the mañaneras, this kind of activity that he realized every day from 7 of the morning to 19, 20, 10 of the morning, every day, he defended in a very strong position, or in a very strong way, the Justice Esquivel. He said that, well, what happened if you copy the thesis is not comparable in any way with the ancient politicals who disgrace this country or whatever. It was not related one thing with another. But the president made a huge defense of the Justice Esquivel, and this is a very hard problem for our country and for the Supreme Court. El traductor quiere decir.
I can ask the question in Spanish and then translate it in English. Uno de los temas a que usted se refirió era el uso de las fuerzas militares en el país de México para que el presidente López Obrador pueda, pues, obtener sus metas, sus propósitos políticos, y también el uso de la Guardia Nacional para hacer eso, y tener ese uso de las fuerzas militares de la Guardia Nacional como policía, para mí representa un problema que el país pueda tener con respecto a la balance entre, pues, el poder ejecutivo del presidente y the rule of law. O sea, es un mecanismo muy clásico para que los presidentes, los ejecutivos puedan tomar más poder usando las fuerzas militares. Entonces, ¿cuáles son los poderes que pueden, pues, evitar que eso pase, ¿no? O sea, ¿cuáles son las leyes que se pueden usar para defender the rule of law contra ese uso de fuerza militar?
My question is about the use of the military and the National Guard by the executive office of the president to carry out some of the more routine aspects of governance, like normal policing. I mean, if you think about it in an international context, it's a classic strongman's play to use the military to accomplish goals domestically, and that can really upset the balance of power between the executive and, well, rule of law in the rest of the country. And so what I'm asking the justice is, what are the safeguards that would stop any kind of excessive use of military force that could destabilize Mexico?
Yes. Well, the Mexican Constitution have a very strong influence from the Constitution of the United States. In the Article 128, the Constitution says that in times of peace, the Army, the Navy, the forces can do any activity that was not related with the military questions. It's a very specific. But several years ago, the Supreme Court opened these possibilities. I I was the only vote 10 against 1. That I say, if the Constitution says that in time of peace, we are in time of peace because Mexico don't have a declaration of war to anyone. Well, that's my position alone. Well, this is for me the frame that the Supreme Court need to understand to see the problem. But we have a lot of problems now. The problem for me is, I try to explain my position. Now Mexico is living in a militarization problem. No? The army is taking more and more and more activities. Well, this is a problem, a very, very complex problem. But what happened, and this is a difficult question for me in my poor English, what happened if Mexico passed from militarization to militarism? I don't know if in English, I don't know, are different. But in Spanish, for militarization, I understand the process when the army take more and more activities. But militarism is a cultural category. In militarism, in my perspective, the values, the principles from the army take a representation in the society, and it's very different. This attitude from force, from behavior of macho behavior, this kind of different things take an representation, take a position in the whole country. For me, this is one of the most important problems, and the possibilities to limit the army actions is amparo, like many things in Mexico. But in amparo, the Supreme Court need to do the job. One judge in Mexico, very important judge, la juez Quintana, Macías, perdón, la juez Macías, who lives in Guanajuato. Maybe you can see what she resolved. Take a very strong position, suspend the integration from the Guardia Nacional, the new corps, to the army. It's an incredible, strong, and very, very good decision. This is the kind of actions from some judges from the Supreme Court that in this moment can refrain the incorporation from the army. But in the next weeks, I suppose, or months, 3 or 4 or 5 months, the Supreme Court need to resolve the cases about the militarization that this young guy from Argentina asked me. This is the problem. I don't know what happened. What happened if López Obrador make a lot of pressure in the Supreme Court, or the justices can sustain the Constitution. It's a big question.
Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation. My question is, I have 2 questions related to the issue of impunity that you covered, and the relation between impunity and mandatory pretrial detention. For example, in your José, some people see mandatory pretrial detention as a way of diminishing the problem of impunity because it lowers the probatory standards needed to incarcerate people. So my first question is, what do you think is like the role of mandatory pretrial detention in López Obrador security strategy? And what would be, and my second question is, what do you think would be the reaction of the Supreme Court after the recent opinion of the Inter-American?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Well, in Mexico, in the judicial reform of the 2008, yes, with Calderón, the same way that make changes in Chile, Costa Rica, Colombia is the same procedure. The Presidente Calderón put in the laws, only the laws, in the level of the law, the statutes, the mandatory pretrial detention. But in 2011, I don't remember, no, 11 years, he put the mandatory pretrial detention in the Constitution. It's a huge change. But when Presidente López Obrador had the power, he made several amendments, not only one, several amendments, to put different kind of crimes in the Constitution, trying to create a mandatory pretrial detention from different kind of crimes. Well, this is the problem. What happened in the past, and again, I was the only vote. I am very proud of that vote. Is that I say that is complicated to sustain that in the Mexican Constitution have restraint against the American Convention of Human Rights, because in Mexico we have a very interesting Article 1. It's interesting for all of you that read this Article 1 of the Constitution. This article says that in Mexico the protection of human rights that are in the Constitution and the human rights that are in the treaties signed by the Mexican state are in the same position. The other 10 justices say, well, this is true, but when the Constitution have a specific restraint, the international treaty are in a different position related with the Constitution. I say no. The Article 1 don't say that. The Article 1 they say that all the rights are in the same position, and you need to apply the right who is much more protective to a specific person in each situation. But this is the theory. What happened? In Mexico, the mandatory pretrial detention was applied several years ago against two persons who remained in jail for 18 years in this kind of situation. I went to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights like expert to Brasilia, because in the last summer the Human Rights Court had sessions in Brasilia. I visited this incredible city, and I was like an expert in that case. And my position is that the mandatory pretrial detention is unconventional, is against the American Convention of Human Rights, and for that reason it need to be expelled. Well, recently, in the first days of this year, the International Court said that Mexico effectively violates the American Convention of Human Rights. It's a very important decision, because the court condemned the Mexican state to remove the mandatory pretrial detention. And the problem is this one, is the second part of your question. Presidente López Obrador said that the pretrial mandatory detention, etc., is very important, is fundamental for the political security, the political security of the state. I suppose that this question will be one of the most important facts in the next future. But the Inter-American Court do a very intelligent distinction. They say, well, of course, the Mexican state is obligated by this resolution. And of course, the legislative authorities need to remove the pretrial detention, the mandatory pretrial detention from the Constitution and from the laws. Well, it's okay. And say, but the Mexican judges are obligated by this resolution. And for that reason, they don't forget that resolution. What happens if the prosecutor demands to a judge, federal or local judge, the determination, the resolution for a mandatory pretrial detention from some person, from some criminal or presunto criminal? The judge, in my point of view, can deny the petition because the Inter-American Court said you are obligated by my decision. It's very bright construction in the decision of the American. I think that in the next months, when the prosecutor, federal or local prosecutor, ask to the judges, federal or local judges, to otorgar, ¿cómo dirías?
To give to award.
The decision, the judge said, I can't do it. Why? Because I am obligated by the resolution. It's a very fine decision. Are the paragraph 2108 and 219 from the resolution. And save you the lecture of the moment. That's
What was that again? 2108?
218 and 219. This is the core of the decision. Really, it's very bright. Huh? I'm surprised. Oh.
Okay, I think we'll stop there, but some people might want to
Yes.
talk to you after. Thank you.
Thank you.